The static crackled through the headset like broken glass, cutting through the pre-dawn silence at forward operating base Kestrel. Major Victor Reeves adjusted his flight helmet, running through the final systems check on his AH-64D Apache longbow. The rotors hadn't even spun up yet, but something felt wrong. Not with the aircraft. The machine was flawless, every sensor green, every weapon system primed. It was the voice coming through his comms that made his blood run cold. Apache 77, this is Tower. Communications check over. The transmission was crystal clear, but the voice behind it carried something that didn't belong in routine radio chatter. There was a tremor, barely perceptible, buried beneath the professional monotone. Reeves had been flying combat missions for 12 years, and he'd learned to read voices the way others read faces. Fear had a frequency all its own. Tower, Apache 77, comms check good, standing by for mission brief. He kept his own voice level, betraying nothing of the unease crawling up his spine. Through his cockpit glass, the desert stretched endlessly toward the horizon, painted in shades of amber and shadow by the rising sun. Apache 77, be advised, the transmission cut to static. When it resumed, the voice was different, steadier, professional. Disregard previous transmission. Weather is clear, winds calm. You are cleared for departure when ready. Reeves frowned, his gloved hand hovering over the radio switch. In the pilot's seat behind him, Captain Brooks shifted slightly, checking his own instruments. Neither man spoke, but both had heard it, the moment when one voice had been replaced by another. "Did you catch that?" Brooks finally asked through the internal comms. "Roger." Someone else took over mid-transmission. Reeves initiated the startup sequence, the twin General Electric T-700 engines beginning their familiar whine. Tower, Apache 77 requests confirmation of air traffic control personnel on duty. Silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds. Then, Apache 77, this is Captain Nix Cordova, acting tower supervisor. Previous controller experienced. Technical difficulties. You are still cleared for departure. The name hit Reeves like a physical blow. Every pilot in the theater knew that name, though most had never seen the face behind it. Cordova wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to be anywhere. 3 months ago, she'd been flying night interdiction missions in the deadliest airspace in the region. Then, overnight, she'd vanished from the flight roster. No explanation, no farewell, just gone. Now she was working tower duty at a forward operating base that barely registered on command's radar. The question that gnawed at Reeves as his Apache lifted into the morning sky wasn't why she was here. It was what had happened to put her there. The desert wind caught his aircraft, and for a moment the Apache seemed to hang suspended between earth and heaven, between the known and the unknowable. In that silence, Reeves made a decision that would change everything. He was going to find out who Captain Nix Cordova really was, and why her voice carried the weight of secrets that could bring down more than just aircraft. The mission parameters called for a routine reconnaissance sweep along the northern border. What Reeves didn't know was that Captain Cordova had been watching those same coordinates for weeks, waiting for someone, anyone, to finally ask the right questions. The transmission that had started as a simple communications check was about to become the thread that unraveled a conspiracy reaching into the highest levels of military command. As the Apache banked east toward the mission area, neither pilot nor tower controller realized they were about to become the last line of defense against an enemy that had already infiltrated their own ranks. The morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across a landscape where nothing was quite what it seemed, and where a single voice crackling through radio static would determine whether justice would finally find its way home. In the control tower, Cordova's hand trembled as she reached for the emergency procedures manual. She had been waiting 3 months for this moment, and now that it had arrived, she wondered if she was strong enough to see it through to the end. The reconnaissance mission should have been routine, a standard patrol along grid section Charlie, where the most dangerous thing they'd encounter was the occasional heat mirage playing tricks with the targeting systems. Major Reeves kept the Apache at 2,000 feet, high enough to avoid small arms fire, low enough to maintain effective surveillance of the rocky terrain below. Captain Brooks worked the sensors from the back seat, his fingers dancing across the multifunction displays with practiced precision. Movement 2 o'clock, approximately 4 kilometers, Brooks reported, his voice carrying the calm professionalism of a man who'd called out 1,000 contacts. Single vehicle, moving north at high speed. Reeves banked the Apache slightly, bringing the M230 chain gun to bear on the target area. Through his monocular display, he could see the dust plume rising from what appeared to be a modified pickup truck. Standard insurgent vehicle, nothing that should have triggered the ice-cold sensation now running through his veins. Apache 77, this is Tower. Cordova's voice cut through the tactical frequency with an urgency that made both pilots straighten. Be advised, you have unknown aircraft approaching from the southwest. Bearing 270, range 12 kilometers and closing. Reeves felt his heart rate spike. Unknown aircraft in this sector meant one of two things. Either command had failed to coordinate with Allied forces, or they were looking at a threat. Tower, Apache 77, request immediate identification of unknown contact. The silence stretched too long. When Cordova's voice returned, it carried a weight that spoke of terrible knowledge held too close for too long. Apache 77, negative radar contact. I repeat, negative radar signature on unknown aircraft. Brooks twisted in his seat, scanning the southwestern sky through the Apache's armored glass. Boss, if she can't see them on radar but she's calling them out, how the hell does she know they're there? The question hung in the air like smoke from a crashed aircraft. Reeves brought the Apache into a defensive turn, gaining altitude while keeping the mysterious ground vehicle in sight. Standard doctrine said to engage known threats first, but something about this entire situation felt like walking into a carefully laid trap. Tower, Apache 77 requests immediate backup and clarification on unknown contact. Reeves kept his voice level, but his hands were already moving to arm the Hellfire missiles. 16 years of military aviation had taught him that when the pieces didn't fit, someone was usually shooting at you. Apache 77, be advised, no backup available. Repeat, no backup available. Unknown contacts now bearing 265, range 8 kilometers. Cordova's transmission carried a note of desperation that cut through military protocol like a blade through silk. Major, you need to trust me on this one. The familiarity in her voice, the way she'd used his rank without it being part of the official communication, sent warning signals through Reeves' tactical awareness. Tower controllers didn't personalize communications during active missions unless something had gone catastrophically wrong. Brooks was now working his sensors frantically, sweeping the southwestern sky for any sign of the approaching aircraft. Still negative contact, boss. If there's something out there, it's either too low for our radar or it's using some serious stealth technology. Or, Reeves said grimly, our tower controller has intel that she's not supposed to have. He made a decision that violated every protocol in the book. Tower, Apache 77, requesting immediate clarification on the source of your intelligence regarding unknown aircraft. The radio silence that followed felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. When Cordova's voice finally emerged from the static, it carried the weight of confession and the sharp edge of imminent danger. Apache 77, I've been monitoring unauthorized communication frequencies. The aircraft approaching your position are not listed on any flight manifest. They're not supposed to exist. Reeves felt the world shift beneath him. Tower, are you saying we're looking at a black operation? Negative, Apache 77. I'm saying you're looking at something much worse than that. The first missile streaked past the Apache's starboard side, close enough that Reeves could see the white-hot exhaust trail burning against the morning sky. The attack came from directly ahead, not from the mysterious aircraft Cordova had warned them about, but from the ground vehicle they'd been tracking. Contact, contact, taking fire from ground target. Brooks's voice crackled through the intercom as he immediately began deploying countermeasures. Chaff and flares burst from the Apache's defensive systems, creating a metallic constellation against the desert backdrop. Reeves threw the aircraft into a violent evasive maneuver, the G-forces pressing both pilots deep into their seats. The Apache's armored hull groaned under the stress, but the machine responded with the lethal grace of a predator. Tower, Apache 7-7 taking effective fire. Request immediate support. Apache 7-7, support is not available. Cordova's voice carried a resignation that spoke of deeper knowledge. The ground target is equipped with advanced surface-to-air missiles, military grade. Someone wanted you in that grid square, Major. The implication hit Reeves like a physical blow. This wasn't a chance encounter with insurgents. This was an ambush, planned and executed with precision that spoke of inside information. Someone with access to their flight plans had positioned that vehicle exactly where they would find it. A second missile launch lit up the desert floor, but this time Reeves was ready. He rolled the Apache inverted, diving toward the ground while Brooks acquired the target with their own weapon systems. The Hellfire missile leaped from its rail with a sound like thunder, its seeker head locked onto the heat signature of the enemy vehicle. The explosion painted the desert in shades of orange and black, sending debris spiraling into the clear morning air. But instead of relief, Reeves felt only a growing sense of dread. Professional ambushes didn't end with a single vehicle. They ended with backup that ensured no witnesses survived. Apache 7-7, you have multiple fast movers approaching from the north. Bearing 350, range 15 kilometers and closing. Cordova's voice carried the kind of calm that came only from someone who had already accepted the worst possible outcome. Major, whoever set this up wanted it to look like an accident, a routine patrol that encountered enemy fire and went down fighting. Brooks was already working his radar, but the approaching contacts appeared and disappeared like ghosts in the electronic spectrum. Boss, these aren't showing consistent signatures. Either they're using adaptive stealth technology, or we're looking at aircraft that officially don't exist. Tower, Apache 7-7, requesting emergency exfiltration route. Reeves brought the Apache to maximum speed, the twin engines screaming as they pushed toward their operational limits. The terrain below blurred into a tapestry of rock and sand, broken only by the occasional cluster of abandoned buildings. Apache 7-7, all exfiltration routes are compromised. I repeat, all routes are compromised. The weight in Cordova's voice suggested she'd been expecting this moment for a long time. Major, I need to tell you something about why I'm really here. The radio crackled with interference, and for a moment, Reeves thought they'd lost communication entirely. When Cordova's voice returned, it carried the kind of clarity that came only from someone who had finally decided to stop running from the truth. 3 months ago, I was flying night interdiction when I intercepted communications that weren't supposed to exist, coordinates for friendly fire incidents that hadn't happened yet, flight plans for aircraft that weren't on any official manifest. I reported what I found through proper channels. The pause that followed felt like the moment between lightning and thunder. 48 hours later, my squadron was transferred out, and I was reassigned to tower duty. Someone wanted me where they could keep an eye on me. Reeves felt the pieces of a terrible puzzle beginning to fall into place. Tower, are you saying this entire sector is compromised? Negative, Apache 7-7. I'm saying the entire operation is compromised, and you just flew into the middle of their cleanup operation. The northern fast movers materialized out of the desert haze like deadly mirages, their sleek profiles cutting through the morning air with predatory precision. Reeves counted 4 aircraft, F-16 Fighting Falcons, but their markings were wrong. Instead of standard U.S. Air Force insignia, they carried neutral gray paint schemes with minimal identification numbers. Apache 77, unknown aircraft have locked onto your position. Cordova's voice carried the steady professionalism of someone reading her own death warrant. Major, those aircraft are squawking friendly identification codes, but their weapons systems are hot. Brooks worked frantically with the defensive systems, but an Apache helicopter against 4 fighter jets was mathematics with only one possible outcome. Boss, we need to set down and find hard cover. Right now. Reeves scanned the terrain below, searching for anything that might provide concealment. The desert landscape offered little comfort, rocky outcroppings that might stop small arms fire, but nothing that could hide a helicopter from aerial detection. Tower, Apache 77 requesting any available intelligence on defensive positions in our current area. Apache 77, there's an abandoned mining complex approximately 2 kilometers northeast of your current position. Grid reference November 74 Alpha. It's not on any official maps. Cordova's voice carried an odd note of hope, as if she'd been saving this information for exactly this moment. The lead F-16 began its attack run, diving toward the Apache with the mechanical precision of a bird of prey. Reeves could see the missile separation as the Sidewinder dropped from its rail, the white exhaust trail drawing a line between predator and prey across the blue desert sky. Missile inbound, braking left. Reeves threw the Apache into another violent evasive maneuver, but this time the physics worked against them. The helicopter's maximum speed was no match for the approaching weapon, and the defensive countermeasures that might fool a heat-seeking missile were useless against the advanced guidance systems of modern air-to-air weapons. The explosion came from behind them, close enough to rattle the Apache's armored hull and spiderweb the rear observation window. Warning lights cascaded across the instrument panel like electronic Christmas decorations, each one representing a system pushed beyond its operational parameters. Hydraulic pressure dropping, engine temperature rising, Brooks reported with the calm precision of a man who had accepted that today might be his last day. We've got maybe 10 minutes before something critical fails. Reeves spotted the mining complex, a collection of low concrete buildings and rusted equipment that spoke of industrial operations abandoned decades ago. It wasn't much, but it was the only hard cover within gliding distance. Tower, Apache 77 beginning emergency approach to November 74 Alpha. Apache 77, be advised, that facility is not abandoned. Cordova's transmission carried a note of urgency that cut through the tactical situation like a knife. Captain Nix Cordova is currently located at those coordinates. She's been waiting for someone to ask the right questions. The words hit Reeves like a physical blow. If Cordova was at the mining complex, then who had been working tower communications? The voice he'd been hearing for the past 30 minutes, the woman who had been guiding them through this nightmare. Who was she? Brooks voiced the question that Reeves couldn't bring himself to ask. Tower, if Cordova is at the mining facility, then who the hell are we talking to? The silence that followed stretched across the radio spectrum like a held breath. When the voice returned, it carried a weight of truth that had been hidden behind layers of deception and careful misdirection. Apache 77, this is Lieutenant Colonel Elena Vasquez, formerly assigned to Special Operations Command. I've been using Captain Cordova's communication protocols to maintain operational security. The confession came with the kind of relief that followed the end of a long-held secret. Gentlemen, you've stumbled into the middle of an operation 3 years in the making, and right now, you're the only witnesses who can prove that it actually happened. The Apache touched down hard between 2 concrete bunkers, its landing gear scraping against broken asphalt as Reeves fought to control the damaged aircraft. The hydraulic systems were failing, and the tail rotor bore scars from the near-miss missile strike. Around them, the abandoned mining complex stretched like a monument to industrial failure, rusted conveyor belts, collapsed storage silos, and the skeletal remains of processing equipment that had been stripped for salvage years ago. Brooks was already running shutdown procedures, his hands moving with the efficiency of a man who understood that every second counted. Engines spooling down, weapons systems safed. "Boss, we've got maybe 2 minutes before those F-16s come back around for another pass." Through the cockpit glass, Reeves could see movement in the shadows between the buildings. A figure emerged from what had once been the mining supervisor's office, a woman in desert camouflage utilities, carrying herself with the unmistakable bearing of military aviation. Even at a distance, he could see the silver wings pinned to her uniform and the captain's bars that caught the morning sunlight. "That's Cordova," Reeves said, recognizing the face from squadron briefings and official photographs. But seeing her in person revealed details that the official records had never captured. The way she moved with the controlled precision of someone who had learned to trust no one. The alert posture of a pilot who had been living on the edge of discovery for too long. The radio crackled with Vasquez's voice from the tower. "Apache 77, Captain Cordova is moving to secure your aircraft. She's been monitoring enemy communications from that location for the past 72 hours." Reeves and Brooks exited the Apache with practiced efficiency, their sidearms drawn and their eyes scanning the surrounding buildings for threats. The mining complex felt like a place where time had stopped. Broken windows stared like empty eye sockets, and the wind made hollow sounds through abandoned machinery. Cordova approached them with the kind of purposeful stride that spoke of urgent business. When she spoke, her voice carried the same professional tone they'd been hearing over the radio, but now Reeves could see the strain in her eyes, the weight of knowledge that had been eating at her for months. "Major Reeves, Captain Brooks." She didn't offer to shake hands, instead gesturing toward the supervisor's office. "We need to get under hard cover immediately. Those F-16s will be back, and next time they won't miss." "Captain, I need to understand what we've walked into here." Reeves followed her toward the building, noting how she moved with the automatic tactical awareness of someone who had been living in hostile territory. "Colonel Vasquez says you've been monitoring enemy communications." "What enemy?" Cordova paused at the office door, her hand resting on the metal handle. When she looked back at them, her expression carried the weight of someone who was about to share a secret that could get them all killed. "Major, how much do you know about Operation Desert Mirror?" The name meant nothing to Reeves, but Brooks straightened as if he'd been struck. "That's a black program, Captain, compartmentalized, need-to-know basis only." "Exactly." Cordova pushed open the office door, revealing an interior that had been converted into a sophisticated communications center. Military-grade radio equipment occupied tables that had once held mining operation paperwork, and multiple monitors displayed tactical information from across the region. "3 months ago, I discovered that Desert Mirror isn't what Command says it is. It's not a counterintelligence operation. It's something much worse." She moved to one of the monitors, calling up a display that showed aircraft movements across the entire theater of operations. Red icons marked the locations of aircraft that didn't appear on any official flight manifest, ghost squadrons flying missions that officially didn't exist. "Those F-16s that just tried to kill you, they're part of Desert Mirror's enforcement wing. Their job is to eliminate anyone who asks too many questions about the program's real purpose." Cordova's voice carried the cold precision of someone reporting facts that had cost her everything she'd once believed in. "Major, you didn't stumble into an ambush. You were led into an execution." The communication equipment in the supervisor's office hummed with electronic efficiency, a stark contrast to the industrial decay surrounding them. Cordova moved between the monitors with practiced familiarity, calling up data streams that painted a picture of military operations spanning multiple countries and time zones. "This is what I've been documenting for the past 3 months," she said, highlighting aircraft movements that formed patterns across the tactical display. Desert Mirror has been running unauthorized strikes against friendly positions, then blamming the casualties on enemy action. Reeves studied the information with growing horror. The red icons on the screen represented aircraft that had conducted bombing runs against Allied forces, special operations teams, and civilian targets that had been deemed problematic by someone operating outside the normal command structure. "Captain, are you telling us there's a rogue military operation conducting friendly fire attacks?" Brooks moved closer to the displays, his pilot's eye immediately recognizing the flight patterns of systematic tactical operations. "Not rogue, Captain. Sanctioned at the highest levels, but operating under protocols that don't officially exist." Cordova called up another screen showing communication intercepts. "I've been recording their operational frequencies for weeks. Every mission is coordinated through channels that bypass normal military communication networks." The office windows rattled as the sound of approaching jet engines filled the desert air. Through the broken glass, Reeves could see the F-16s returning for another attack run, their sleek profiles dark against the blue sky. Vasquez's voice crackled through the radio setup. "All stations, unknown aircraft beginning attack approach on the mining facility. Estimated time to weapons release, 90 seconds. Cordova was already moving, gathering data storage devices and shoving them into a military standard equipment bag. "Major, this intelligence has to reach someone outside the normal chain of command. Everyone connected to Desert Mirror has been either transferred, reassigned, or eliminated." The first cannon burst from the lead F-16 stitched across the mining complex, 20 rounds chewing through abandoned equipment and sending sparks flying from metal surfaces. The sound was like massive hammers striking steel, echoing through the concrete buildings with destructive rhythm. "There," Cordova pointed to a hardened bunker on the far side of the complex. "That structure was built to withstand explosions from the mining operations. It might hold up against air-to-ground missiles." They moved as a team, keeping to the shadows between buildings as the F-16s circled overhead like mechanical vultures. The lead aircraft was already lining up for another pass, its nose pointing directly at the supervisor's office they had just evacuated. Brooks grabbed Cordova's communication equipment while Reeves provided overwatch, scanning the sky for incoming missiles. "Captain, how do we get this information to the right people if everyone in the chain of command is compromised?" "There's one person," Cordova said, her voice carrying a note of desperate hope. "Colonel Sarah Mitchell, Pentagon liaison to the Senate Armed Services Committee. She's been investigating irregularities in special operations funding. If we can get this data to her, she might be able to expose what Desert Mirror really is." The bunker entrance was a heavy steel door set into reinforced concrete, designed to protect mining supervisors from accidental explosions. As they reached the threshold, the second F-16 began its attack run, diving toward their position with the mechanical precision of death itself. The missile strike hit the supervisor's office with enough force to collapse the entire structure, sending a pillar of smoke and debris into the clear desert air. The shock wave rattled the bunker door and rained concrete dust from the ceiling above their heads. "Vasquez, this is Cordova." She keyed the radio with steady hands despite the chaos around them. "We're in the hardened bunker. What's your status?" "Cordova, I'm maintaining communication protocols from the tower, but I don't think I can keep this up much longer. Someone's going to notice that I'm not following standard procedures." Reeves understood the implications immediately. Vasquez was risking her career, and possibly her life to maintain their communication link. If Desert Mirror had people monitoring radio traffic, her unauthorized transmissions would eventually be detected and traced back to their source. Inside the bunker, Emergency lighting cast everything in shades of amber and shadow. The structure had been built to withstand industrial explosions, but it was never designed to serve as a military command post. Cordova spread her equipment across a table that had once held mining safety manuals, creating an improvised intelligence center in the underground space. Major, I need you to understand something about my situation. She connected a portable hard drive to her laptop, calling up files that represented months of careful intelligence gathering. When I first discovered the Desert Mirror communications, I tried to report it through proper channels. My squadron commander told me to forget what I'd heard and focus on my assigned missions. The bunker shook as another missile strike hit somewhere above them, raining dust from the concrete ceiling. The F-16s were conducting a systematic destruction of the mining complex, ensuring that nothing would remain to tell the story of what had happened here. Brooks watched the tactical display on Cordova's laptop, noting the flight patterns of aircraft that officially didn't exist. "Captain, how did you end up assigned to tower duty? That's not a normal career path for a combat pilot." "It wasn't a normal assignment." Cordova's voice carried the bitter edge of someone who had learned hard lessons about military politics. 48 hours after I tried to report the Desert Mirror intercepts, I received transfer orders to Forward Operating Base Kestrel. Tower duty, indefinite assignment. No explanation. No appeal process. Reeves was beginning to understand the deeper implications of their situation. They wanted you somewhere they could monitor your activities. Tower duty meant they could control your communications and limit your access to classified information. Exactly. But what they didn't realize was that tower duty also gave me access to all air traffic communication in this sector. For the past 3 months, I've been recording every unauthorized transmission, every flight that didn't appear on official manifests. She pulled up another file showing aircraft movements that formed a pattern of systematic targeting. Major, Desert Mirror isn't just conducting friendly fire attacks. They're eliminating witnesses to other operations. The radio crackled with Vasquez's voice from the tower. "All stations, enemy aircraft have broken off their attack run and are returning to base. Estimated departure time, 5 minutes. Vasquez, what's their heading?" Cordova keyed the microphone while continuing to transfer data from her intelligence files. "Bearing 270, maintaining low altitude. These aren't standard Air Force F-16s, Cordova. They're carrying ordnance configurations that aren't in any official technical manual." Reeves felt a chill that had nothing to do with the underground temperature. Aircraft carrying unauthorized weapons suggested an operation with resources and backing that went far beyond a simple rogue military unit. "Captain, who has the authority to fund and equip aircraft that don't appear on any official manifest?" Cordova looked up from her laptop, her expression carrying the weight of knowledge that had cost her everything she'd once believed about military service. "Major, that's the question that's going to get us all killed. Desert Mirror has resources that suggest backing at the highest levels of government. Congressional oversight committees, Pentagon Special Programs Office, possibly even intelligence agencies operating outside their legal mandate." The bunker fell silent except for the electronic hum of communication equipment and the distant sound of jet engines fatting into the desert sky. In that silence, all 3 military personnel understood that they had stumbled into something far more dangerous than a simple case of military misconduct. Brooks voiced the question that none of them wanted to ask. "Captain, if this operation has backing at the highest levels, then who can we trust to investigate it?" Cordova's fingers paused over her keyboard as she considered the implications of that question. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the kind of determination that had made her a combat pilot in the first place. "Gentlemen, we're going to find out. Because right now, we're the only witnesses left who can prove that any of this actually happened." The silence that followed the departure of the F-16s felt more ominous than the attack itself. Cordova worked methodically through her intelligence files, copying data to multiple storage devices, while Brooks monitored the radio frequencies for any sign of additional hostile aircraft. Reeves found himself studying the woman who had become the center of this conspiracy, noting details that official records had never captured. Captain Nix Cordova moved with the controlled precision of someone who had learned to trust only verified information. Her pilot's wings were tarnished from months of ground duty, but the way she handled the communication equipment revealed the steady hands of someone who had guided aircraft through hostile territory. The official photographs in her personnel file had shown a confident aviator. The woman working beside him carried the weight of someone who had discovered that confidence could be a fatal weakness. "Major, I need to show you something that's going to change how you think about this entire operation." She called up a file that showed communication intercepts from the past 6 months. "These are recordings of Desert Mirror operational frequencies. Listen to this." The audio playback filled the bunker with the sound of tactical communications conducted in careful, professional tones. But as Reeves listened, he began to recognize voices, senior officers from his own command structure, squadron leaders he had served under, intelligence personnel who had briefed him on countless missions. "Captain, those are people from our own chain of command." Brooks leaned closer to the speaker, his expression darkening as he recognized additional voices. "That's Colonel Harrison from the 160th. That's Major Davidson from Special Operations Command." "Now listen to this," Cordova said, playing another recording. The voices were the same, but the content made Reeves' blood run cold. They were discussing the elimination of military personnel who had asked inconvenient questions, the staging of friendly fire incidents to remove problematic witnesses, and the coordination of aircraft that would conduct operations while maintaining complete deniability. The radio crackled with Vasquez's voice from the tower. "All stations, be advised I have multiple aircraft approaching from the southeast. Bearing 130, range 20 kilometers. These are not the same aircraft that conducted the previous attack." Cordova immediately switched to the tactical frequency, her voice carrying the kind of calm authority that Reeves had heard from the best combat pilots. "Vasquez, can you identify aircraft type and armament configuration?" Negative on positive identification. Aircraft are maintaining radio silence and flying below effective radar coverage. But Cordova, their approach vector suggests they know exactly where you are. The implications hit all three of them simultaneously. The mining complex was supposed to be abandoned, a location that wouldn't appear on any tactical map. If the approaching aircraft knew their precise location, it meant that someone with access to their current position had provided targeting information. Reeves felt the pieces of a terrible puzzle falling into place. "Captain, how many people knew about this location?" "Besides us, only Colonel Vasquez." Cordova's voice carried a growing realization that made her fingers pause over the keyboard. "Major, if those aircraft have our coordinates, then either Vasquez has been compromised, or someone has been monitoring our communications from the beginning." The bunker's communication equipment suddenly erupted with transmission across multiple frequencies, tactical channels, emergency frequencies, and communication protocols that Reeves had never heard before. The voices were coordinated, professional, and discussing their current situation with the kind of detailed intelligence that spoke of real-time surveillance. Brooks was already moving toward the bunker entrance, checking the locking mechanism and estimating their defensive options. "Boss, if they've been monitoring our communications, then they know about the intelligence data that Captain Cordova has been gathering." "More than that," Cordova said grimly, copying the last of her files to a portable storage device. "They know that we're the only witnesses who can prove that Desert Mirror exists, which means they can't let us leave this location alive." The sound of approaching rotor blades began to fill the desert air above them, the distinctive rhythm of military helicopters conducting tactical operations. Through the bunker's ventilation system, they could hear multiple aircraft, enough firepower to level the entire mining complex if necessary. Vasquez's voice cut through the radio static with urgent desperation. All stations, I count 6 helicopters conducting coordinated approach to your location. These are not standard search and rescue aircraft. Repeat, these are attack helicopters with full combat loadout. The attack helicopters circled the mining complex like mechanical predators, their rotor wash stirring up dust clouds that obscured the broken landscape. Through the bunker's narrow observation window, Reeves could see the dark silhouettes of what appeared to be modified Black Hawks, but their armament configuration was unlike anything in the standard military inventory. Major, those aircraft are carrying weapon systems that don't appear in any official technical manual. Cordova had connected a digital scope to the observation window, allowing them to examine the helicopters in detail. Look at the missile configuration on the lead aircraft. Reeves studied the image on her laptop screen, noting the sleek profiles of missiles that were clearly more advanced than standard military ordnance. The aircraft themselves bore minimal identification markings, neutral gray paint schemes with alphanumeric codes that suggested they belonged to a unit that officially didn't exist. Captain, what kind of resources does it take to field aircraft like these? Brooks was monitoring the radio frequencies, listening to the coordinated tactical communications of the approaching helicopter crews. The kind of resources that require congressional authorization and oversight, Cordova replied grimly. Which means Desert Mirror has backing from people who can authorize black budget expenditures without normal accounting procedures. The lead helicopter settled into a landing pattern approximately 200 meters from the bunker entrance. As its skids touched the ground, Reeves could see personnel deploying from the aircraft, soldiers wearing combat gear that bore no identifying patches or insignia. They moved with the tactical precision of special operations personnel, but their equipment and procedures suggested training that went beyond standard military doctrine. Vasquez's voice crackled through the radio with growing urgency. All stations, ground personnel are establishing a perimeter around your location. I count at least 20 personnel with full tactical gear. Vasquez, can you identify their unit affiliation? Cordova kept her voice steady despite the fact that they were now surrounded by hostile forces. Negative. No identifying marks, no standard communication protocols. But their tactical procedures suggest they're not regular military. These people have been trained specifically for operations that require complete deniability. Brooks moved away from the observation window, checking their limited supply of ammunition and emergency equipment. Boss, we've got maybe 30 rounds between us, no heavy weapons and no way to call for backup. If they decide to storm this bunker, we're not going to last very long. Reeves understood the mathematical reality of their situation, but something about the tactical setup outside bothered him. Professional soldiers didn't establish elaborate perimeters around a target they intended to eliminate immediately. The deployment pattern suggested they wanted something other than simple termination. Captain, why haven't they attacked yet? He studied the tactical display on Cordova's laptop, noting how the hostile personnel had positioned themselves to prevent escape rather than conduct an immediate assault. Because they need the intelligence data I've been gathering, Cordova said, her voice carrying the